Hello and welcome into episode 3 now of the Northwestern Roundtable podcast. I'm your host, as always, Gavin Dorsey. Now coming off of a win, the Wildcats last weekend beat UCLA 0-4, but still beat a Big Ten opponent 17-14 at home. Northwestern jumped up 17-0, allowed a field goal just before the half. UCLA slowly crawled back into it. But a win is a win. Northwestern comes out on top and has its first conference win of the season. The Wildcats advanced to 2-2, including 1-1 on the season. And Northwestern now will play Louisiana-Monroe out of the Sun Belt coming up on Saturday, October 4th. That is a 2:30 p.m. kickoff time. Overall, a mixed bag, and I'm excited to talk about it coming up with Zach Koons of Sports Illustrated and the host of the Bleav in Northwestern podcast. Excited to share with you our conversation. I've been on Zach's podcast several times talking about the Wildcats, so now pleased to return the favor. We talk about Preston Stone, what succeeded for him, what hasn't worked for him, why the UCLA game could be a good sign. According to PFF, it was Preston Stone's highest graded game of the year. Talked about a potential path forward for Zach Stone and the offense. Big days from Caleb Komolafe, who had 119 yards on 27 carries. How's that for one of your first career starts? Joseph Hyman was great as well. Could we see more of him against Louisiana-Monroe? We talked about the receiver conundrum, I'll say, trying to find somebody outside of Griffin Wilde who can really be a downfield threat for Preston Stone. The Wildcats will take on the Warhawks this Saturday at home. It is homecoming, and now I am excited to share with you my conversation with Zach Koons of Sports Illustrated and the Bleav in Northwestern podcast. Here you go. I am pleased now to welcome to the Northwestern Roundtable podcast, Zach Koons. Zach, I've been on your podcast previously a bunch. It's been a great time, and I'm glad to have you on this one. Zach is a writer for Sports Illustrated and also the host of the Bleav in Northwestern podcast, also following all things Wildcats. Zach, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Gavin. Yeah, no, pumped to be here. Always excited to have more Northwestern podcasts, media in the ecosystem. Yeah, no, pumped to be here and very excited to be on after a win. Not something we can really say all that often. So yeah, no, pumped to chat about it.
Yeah, I was just thinking about all of the podcasts where it's, you kind of just have to stop yourself from getting in a little bit of a funk, like, oh my gosh, this could be another terrible year. They just lost by 20 to Oregon. It's a ranked team, trying to find a little bit of that devil's advocate in there. But, coming off a 17-14 home win against UCLA, granted, UCLA, a team that is now 0-4, has parted ways / fired their head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, all just 4 weeks into the season. And this is as one of the premier teams that has joined the Big Ten from the, rest in peace, formerly Pac-12. Still, a win is a win. And Northwestern, all things considered, had a mixed bag, but generally a lot of really good things in that UCLA win. What were some of the kind of main things that stuck out to you in watching that game? And did the win over UCLA change your perspective, your confidence on how this season is going to go for Northwestern?
Yeah, I think I'd start there. I think a lot of us were coming into this game, and I say that as media members, as fans, a lot of people were coming into this game and thinking about this being the measuring stick for the rest of the season and really exactly how good Northwestern could be or how bad they could be this season. And unfortunately, I kind of feel like we're emerging from this game with just more questions, because the Northwestern football that we saw in the first half, I think, is the blueprint for what this Wildcats team can be. And to me, that's a really well-balanced offense that doesn't have to rely too heavily on the arm of Preston Stone, especially given his struggles just protecting the football this season, but rather is going to lean heavily on the ground game. And I think in terms of one of those bright spots, something that really, I mean, this is now the Caleb Komolafe game. I mean, what a standout showing from him. I really don't think, as I think back to last year, that I thought that he was capable of doing this, that he was capable of being this bell cow back in the Big Ten, and especially not this soon. And, through a series of events, sometimes opportunity comes knocking, even under the awful circumstances that it did with Cam Porter's injury. But he really stepped up, and he put his hand up and was like, I'm ready for 27 carries in this game. And I think some Northwestern fans thought it should have been way more. I wouldn't say I'm in that category, but perhaps we can get there. But yeah, I mean, I think between him and the performance of the offensive line, who has been a group that has been exceptional to me all season long, even with the struggles, I think that really shows the blueprint that Northwestern is going to make things, or try to make things, a lot simpler for Preston Stone. That doesn't mean taking the ball out of his hands entirely, because obviously that came back to bite Northwestern in the second half of this game. However, it does mean you have talented guys like Caleb Komolafe, like Joseph Hyman II in the backfield. You can rely on them, and they can keep you in some of these football games. Like you said, UCLA now 0-4. It's very possible the Bruins end the season without a win. And if that's going to be the case, are we going to look back on this game and think, oh, well, maybe we took too much away from that. Maybe we thought that Northwestern should have done a lot more after that game. I don't really know. I think we're going to get a real sense of this team once they're at probably 3-3 after Penn State. But I would say there was a lot more positive in this game than there was negative. And that's what Northwestern fans should really take away.
I will say this regarding the win against a currently winless, maybe future, we'll see how long the winless for the rest of the season lasts for UCLA. They don't ask how, they ask how many. And you need 6 wins to get to a bowl game. Northwestern, I just did a story today about this, actually. If Northwestern is able to beat Louisiana-Monroe and Purdue, they will need to just go 2-4 over the final 6 games, assuming they also lose to Penn State as expected. So the interesting thing that stuck out to me after really thinking about UCLA is I was at that game, and as soon as it ended, I obviously felt a lot worse than I do now, because you see a 17-point lead in the first half. You see, hey, the Northwestern offense finally seems like it's clicking, and then you slowly see it crumble away, and you're like, how is UCLA still in this game? Play calling a little bit too conservative, but the defense ends up holding on at the end, and you say, okay, a win is a win, it's done. But in the days since then, I've actually felt a lot better about this win for Northwestern, because I don't just think that this is, I'm not going to say it was really telling for us, but I think that it absolutely establishes the blueprint for the Wildcats moving forward. We saw what Caleb Komolafe could do, the 27 carries, well over 100 yards. He was late to the press conference because he was in the cold tub. Man, take as much time in the cold tub as you need. That is okay. He put the team on his back. Joseph Hyman, as incredible as he was, only had 8 carries, which is a little bit surprising. I almost wonder if they were saving him and just kind of saying, you know what, UCLA has a really, really soft run defense. We're going to pound Komolafe up the middle and, off the guards every single opportunity that we have, and save a little bit of what Hyman can do for a little later. But because of the success in that run game, they were able to rely so much more on Preston Stone just to make the easy plays. And granted, it was pretty hard when there were no other solid, reliable receiving options outside of Griffin Wilde. But, he started the game on a roll. Granted, he missed his last, I want to say it was his last 6 throws, but he started incredibly well. And the success of the run game has really helped open up what Preston Stone can do in the passing game so far this year. So I've got a quick little bit of a stat for you. Northwestern and Zach Lujan have called play action on 27.3% of plays so far this year, or 27.3% of passes this year. So that'd be 72% non-play action. On those play action plays, Preston Stone has completed 72% of his passes and has a yards per attempt of 11.4. You compare that to no play action, it's 56% completion percentage and 4.3 yards per attempt. So what you see here is the time to throw obviously is a lot longer. And the question for Preston Stone has been you need to get rid of the ball incredibly quickly. But because of the success in the run game, that's pushed a lot of the linebackers and the secondary levels in, and he's been able to, even though it takes a little bit longer, he's been able to confuse the defense slightly more and dice them up the way that he can with his arm talent. He also, in finding this success on both sides, the pressure to sack rate has been significantly different. The pressure to sack rate is 14% higher for him on plays that don't have play action, which you would think opposite because he's spending so much more time, having to fake the run before getting ready to throw. But in actuality, it's just made his job so much easier. And I think especially in an offense where the main goal is, hey, you don't have to do as much. I think they found the blueprint moving forward for what can be successful both for the run game and for Stone.
Right, and there's a number of factors, right? And like you can't run play action unless you have the protection up front. And there have been times I think Northwestern's offensive line has been really good this season, but there were times against Tulane and there were times against Oregon where they got beat, and the talent on the other side on those defensive lines really showed out. And Preston Stone, when he's under pressure, I think we have a pretty clear indication that he gets flustered. He, in those moments, is not quite assessing the risk as well as he could. And then I think then the other major issue, and you touched on this, has been the receivers. It's just if Griffin Wilde is going to be the only one who's able to create any sort of separation, if that is off for a play, if he's double covered on a play, if he slips, then there's not a whole lot of separation that these other guys are getting for Stone to be able to find those windows. And like you said, play action takes time to develop. And I think in this UCLA game, as I was watching Stone sit there back in the pocket, if the offensive line gives him that time, when Stone has the time, and I think Wilde really made his living in this game off those like 13 to 17 yard routes that like he's able to kind of just sit down in those middle levels of the zone. And I'm like, he is the perfect zone beater because he's a great route runner. He is able to get separation if you need it. But those 13 to 17 yard plays, they take time to develop. And so it really has to be the whole cog kind of working as one. And like you said, that starts with the run game. And if the run game is going to free you up to give you those opportunities, then things are going to go well. The 14% higher on non-play action passes is baffling. But then you kind of think about it. If you watch some of that game, I'm already thinking about the 3rd and 4 at the end of the game when Northwestern is trying to put the ball game out of reach. Northwestern Stone drops back to pass, doesn't run play action, and gets sacked. So like that's a clear example, and I think was a play call head scratcher from the coaching staff, but it really is. It seems he's just so much more comfortable getting on the move, being able to kind of spring out of that play action movement and then be able to deliver a nice ball. I mean, we'll see against some of these better defensive lines because UCLA's defensive line and run defense is right up there with the worst in the country. I'm pretty sure I looked earlier this week. I think they might have been 134th in run defense. So
they were
I don't
130
think
before Northwestern played them. I haven't checked since then, but they were the lowest Power 4 team easily.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say that that the 200 close to 200 yards that they allowed on the ground to Northwestern is going to help in that department. So yeah, we'll see against the stronger competition, but if anything, this should just be a confidence boost because it's not anything that the offense in particular did wrong down the stretch that made this game really that close.
Right. And regarding the 3rd and 4 play, I did kind of understand it because in that situation, I just don't think that you want Preston Stone to turn his back to the defense, and you've decided that you want to be aggressive in order to get that first down, essentially wrap the game up. But in that instance, you also know UCLA is going to send the pressure. So you kind of just have to get the ball out as soon as possible. pressure breaks down, he ends up going into it. I understand it a little bit, but I don't think that Lujan was fully, absolved of blame as far as play calling, especially in the second half. But we talked a little bit about the wide receivers and the massive issues that the Wildcats have had there. Griffin Wilde was 7 catches for 98 yards, and you mentioned just how great of a route runner he is. He's also incredible at the point of the catch and being able to being able to get up and grab jump balls so that Preston Stone doesn't necessarily have to be on the money every single time. Outside of him, it's been rough. We saw Frank Covey and Ricky Amarazi essentially get benched last game in favor of Hayden Elegon and Drew Wagner, but they weren't much better. They ended up with the 3 catches for -4 yards. Wilde was the only Northwestern wide receiver that had more than 1 catch. So I asked for you going into this Louisiana-Monroe game. I had set up before the question of what are you looking for from the Wildcats? And I guess I'm kind of teeing you up on this one. How does Northwestern get its other receivers involved? What is the long-term answer for the passing game outside of Wilde?
I think there are some glimpses of what Lujan is trying to do when it comes to just getting the ball quickly into the hands of different guys and then hoping that they can make a play after the fact, right? So you mentioned the complete line change that Northwestern did at receiver, and I think a lot of people liked what they saw from Drew Wagner in against Oregon and just some of the previous games. And I mean, look, everybody can't stop talking about the punt return touchdown from last year against Iowa. So it's about trying to just get the ball to these guys in space in some regard. But it's clear to me that the way to do that is not going to be by throwing the ball 12 yards down the field. Is not going to be by throwing the ball 30 yards down the field. And unfortunately, that's kind of Preston Stone's bread and butter. We knew when he came over this last year that he's a guy who likes to throw the ball down the field. He likes to pick on man coverage. He likes to get the ball to speedy receivers down the sideline. Unfortunately, Northwestern doesn't have that. So you have to try and figure out different ways. And I think the way that Northwestern has tried to do that, unfortunately, to some pretty frustrating results, is you see some of the kind of jet sweep type pop passes or getting the ball out quickly on a screen. I think that Hunter Welsing catch that he had the 21-yard gain on, that was a quick pass to the outside, just getting Welsing in space, letting the big guy rumble down the field and make a play. And I think it's going to have to be elements like that, which in a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of offensive coordinators, a lot of offensive-minded guys would tell you that's just like another element to the run game. So I kind of feel like Northwestern is just going to continue to lean into that because I just don't really see that. The thing is, we have enough of a sample size, right, through 4 games of what these other wide receivers are. And the reality is they're not guys that are going to create space down the field. I kind of liked a few things that Hayden Elegon did in this game. I think he drew a pass interference that came up in kind of a pretty big spot for Northwestern. I think he's really he's the next most likely option who I think Northwestern could emphasize, and I think that's evident in the snap count. He had 41 snaps, which was more than Wilde in this game. So just a bigger guy, helps in the run game with blocking too. So I think that's where Northwestern's going to look. I've been pounding the table. I'm going to keep saying it. Get Joseph Hyman II the ball in space. Only good things happen. And like you said, the touches for him were a little bit down in this game. And I don't think that was I think it might have been a conscious decision in the second half because Northwestern, I keep harping on it, but seemed pretty content to try and salt the game away and just run Komolafe up the middle as many times as possible. But I think that those are great opportunities when a defense is going to sell out against that. Flip the ball to Hyman on a screen, get him out in space, line him up in the slot. He can make plays, and I think not really doing that as a downfield separator, but I think Northwestern is just going to have to emphasize creative ways to get their guys the ball on the outside where they can make somebody miss because it's not going to really work with the downfield passing game.
Absolutely. And this is something that I've struggled with as well because, you know, in my head, the way to do this a lot, and we harped on this so much in the last episode. A lot of it was Ethan Siegel and I talking about why is there no screen game? Why is the screen game not involved? And when they have done so, it has been really effective. But essentially what I would be worried about this essentially turning into too much is, hey, anytime Preston Stone drops back and they're looking down 10 yards down the field, it's going to Wilde because there's no other options. And at this point in time, I don't see any way that you say, hey, this second and third wide receiver job has already been claimed by somebody. You have to keep rotating people in until somebody proves it. And if Covey ends up coming back in and it's like, hey, he made a couple grabs this game, or Amarazi does the same, which we haven't really seen a ton of. We've seen a couple grabs here and there. I would agree with you. I think Elegon and Wagner are probably the next two up. But I just worry about getting in a situation where every single time it's a downfield pass, the others are just all decoys, and then they can start to double up on Wilde, which is kind of what we saw, near the end of the Oregon game where he wasn't getting targeted as much as he was in the first half because they were really keying in on him. I do think that, and Wilde has split a good amount of his reps between the outside and the slot. I do think that a lot more of having Hyman run routes downfield, just because even if you are missing a little bit of that pass catching element, he's able to get separation. And the wide receivers so far have not been able to get separation. They've tried a lot of the jet sweep stuff as well. Some of it's worked, some of it hasn't. I Bleav outside of one fumble from Chase Farrell, I Bleav he's been in a couple of them. Wagner's done a couple, Hyman's done a couple of them. But you have to make the downfield passing game work for players outside of Wilde if you're Zach Lujan, because 4 games in, it's becoming a little obvious that Wilde is someone that you can key in on, and they have to stay ahead of it before opposing teams really dial in on it. I wanted to kind of move forward. We're over the 20-minute mark here, previewing this Saturday's game. Northwestern plays Louisiana-Monroe, who is 3-1. That one loss was 73-0 against Alabama. I'm not comparing Northwestern to Alabama, but the Alabama game is the only Power 5 or Power 4 team that Louisiana-Monroe has faced. I ask to you, what is your outlook for this game? Do you see Northwestern winning it, and do you have a score? Is it closer than 73-0? Because I'm assuming it will be.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think I've seen enough from Alabama. This was Alabama's get right revenge game after Florida State, and very very clear that the Tide took exception to everybody writing them off after one game. Yeah, I think this is a pretty solid team for the Sun Belt this year. I mean, I don't think that they're really gonna like get into the mixture for like a college football playoff berth or anything like that. The Sun Belt is just not. It's one of the lower tier conferences and leagues in the FBS. So I don't think that Northwestern should struggle all that much in this game, and kind of just looking into some of the guys and the names to know and the research here, I really think Louisiana-Monroe is going to rely heavily on the run game, so it's going to be a lot of a guy by the name of Braylon McReynolds. He is really kind of the lead back, and the Warhawks really rely heavily on him, and I don't really think you can run against this Northwestern team unless you're just kind of completely overmatching them on the offensive line, and I think that was the case with Tulane and Oregon. Also, I would say in both of those games against the Green Wave and against the Ducks, you had a mobile quarterback. You had somebody who could hurt you. I think we saw that with Nico Iamaleava as well, that Northwestern really struggles to contain those sorts of players. Monroe just doesn't have that. Aiden Armenta is just not. He's the quarterback for the Warhawks. He just is really a pocket passer and hasn't really been that good this season. 58% completion percentage, 5 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. He's not going to hurt Northwestern with his legs. So I think Northwestern's defense, look, they're gonna be thinking about how they allowed all these points in the second half to UCLA. they're going to think that they got some unwanted criticism and unwarranted criticism coming out of this UCLA game. I think the defense is going to be up for the task. And then on offense, it's going to be a heavy Northwestern run game. And unfortunately, I wish we could see Northwestern continue to test out that balance of what exactly is the right mixture between keeping the ball on the ground and turning it back over to Preston Stone and letting him work in play action. But I think it's going to be a run-heavy approach for Northwestern. I'd say if I were to give a score, it would probably be Northwestern 27 and then Louisiana-Monroe 7. So comfortably covering the spread. I just don't see the Warhawks being able to score in a way that keeps them competitive. And I do think that Northwestern, under David Braun's tenure, they beat the teams that they are supposed to beat. And he tends to do it pretty handily. He does it against FCS competition. This is a step up now, but it's not quite the level of UCLA, much less Tulane or Oregon.
I went with a very similar one. I went with 27-10. I mean, I think obviously the running game is the thing that you really have to watch out for with Louisiana-Monroe and the talented backs. But I just think that at this point in time, the Northwestern roster, it's going to be able to take care of business. And, you mentioned it, Braun has tended to do so against opponents that Northwestern should have been able to beat. Tulane, I guess, being the only, I Bleav, group of 5 team, or the only non-power team that Northwestern has lost to, but that's a college football playoff contender. Tulane is basically, whether they end up in the Pac-12, Pac whatever, or if they end up getting an invite to the ACC, or I don't know. I'm assuming that Tulane is going to be in a power conference in a couple of years. Regardless, I really liked what I saw out of Northwestern's offense. I think that they're going to continue to find rhythm, and the defense continues to be stout this year. The two run games, the 2 games against Tulane and Oregon, in which they allowed a ton of rushing yards. Most of those were off of big plays, which came off of turnovers by the offense. And so I think Preston Stone had 0 turnover-worthy plays last game after having 10 over the first 3 games. If they are just able to control the ball, give the defense time to recover, I think that this unit is going to be, it should be able to hold up against a team like Louisiana-Monroe. So I'm going with 27-10. I think that, granted, David Braun has said often, and we've heard a lot, that he expects Damon Walters and Josh Fussell back very soon. But this time it sounded like he kind of meant it. So I'm relying on some reinforcements in the secondary, and I think this one comes away with a win for the Wildcats. Zach, I've appreciated taking the time with you today. Appreciated you hopping on. What do you have to plug? Where can listeners and readers find you?
Yeah, I think for the listeners of this podcast, the Bleav in Northwestern podcast is still going strong. Wherever you get your podcasts, on Apple, on Spotify. You can follow me at Zach Koons on X or on Blue Sky. That's where I'm tweeting out my Northwestern thoughts and kind of just generally plugging the podcast as often as possible. And then you can also check me out on Sports Illustrated. I write a weekly best games to watch in college football. So if you're kind of trying to keep an eye out what's on the landscape, maybe you're trying to get some insight into future Northwestern opponents, you can check that out. And then just generally make sure you're following all the work we're doing at si.com/college football. Pat Forty, Brian Fisher, great guys to work with, and putting out a lot of great content to keep you on top of the national slate. Not a lot of Northwestern chatter so far, but maybe things will turn around over the coming weeks.
Yeah, nothing yet, but you never know. You never know. And I mean, Penn State just lost to Oregon. Anything is possible. Anything is possible. I will say that. All right, thank you so much for hopping on, Zach.
Thanks, Gavin.
Huge shout out and special thanks to Zach for coming on the pod. Glad we got to talk about Northwestern and its upcoming game against Louisiana-Monroe. That's at 2:30 p.m. kickoff time at home on Saturday. I will not be there. I'll be up in Minneapolis running my first ever marathon. So wish me luck in that regard. You can keep everything coming, keep following everything that we will be doing coming up on the Northwestern Roundtable site. That's roundtable.io/sports. youtube.com/ncaa/Northwestern. You can listen to more of our podcast content on YouTube and Spotify, and also find press conferences and other video content on our YouTube channel, Northwestern Roundtable, as well. Looking forward to continuing the coverage all throughout the week. You can find all of our stuff in the links below and at the aforementioned Northwestern Roundtable page. And until next time, I'll see you then.